Welcome to the Women in Wealth podcast, brought to you by Regina McCann HESS, a certified financial planner with over 2 decades of experience. This show is for professional women who want guidance in working towards their retirement vision in learning, building, planning, striving for your dreams, and putting the work in now so that you can pursue your financial independence. Hello, I'm Regina McCann HESS, president of Forge Wealth Management, and welcome to our Women in Wealth series. Today, we're going to talk about a heavy topic, and we're going to be talking about navigating the life as a widow. Obviously, this is not for the faint of heart, but sadly, it is a reality, and sometimes we know it's coming, and sometimes we don't. Either way, it's an extremely emotional time. I think it's the third most difficult life transition that we could ever happen. And when I say widow, it could be widow or widower. Either way, it's a very, very difficult path. And you would think, oh, is it better if it's sudden or better if we know it's coming? Neither way is easy. So in addition to navigating the emotional landmines that are there, one of the things that happens is a widow or widower will walk around in a fog for at least a year. I mean, the fog is real. People talk about it, and the only way they can describe it is as a fog. Like they feel like they're literally walking through a wall of fog. They can't hear as well. They can't see as well. They can't analyze as well. They just are numb. Like I'm sure at some point in our lives we've felt something similar, but I think only going through something like that we'd feel it full on. So as a result of that, the emotional turmoil is really, really tough, right? But in addition to that, there's a lot of things that you need to do and a lot of decisions that need to be made. Now, we do recommend that people, when they become a widow or a widower, not to make major life decisions for at least a year. And that gives them a little bit of time to navigate this. It doesn't mean that they're going to be done navigating it. There's no time limit for grief. And don't let anybody tell you there's a time limit for grief, because everyone grieves their own way. And every grief could take a different time frame. You could grieve your spouse for decades. It's just a different way to grieve. And the grieving is okay. And it's just the time you have to have time for that. And that's why we say try not to make major life decisions while you're going through that for at least the first year. And as you come out of that fog, maybe then you can make a little bit better decisions. So we have that. So talking about some of those decisions, there are some decisions and some things that you actually have to handle early on as you become a widow. So we're going to talk about some of those places that you have to start. It's not going to be a full list. It's just, a few items, action steps, key documents that you're going to have to, take notice of or recreate. But these are important things. One of the first things that you're going to want to do is, and your undertaker, funeral home, they may help you with this. You're going to need your spouse's death certificate, and you're going to need multiple copies of that. Why? Because us financial people need those in order to start the transfer process of assets going to the beneficiaries. There's paperwork that we have to do, and that's one of the first pieces of information that we need. You obviously want to talk to your financial advisor. You want to talk to your accountant, your trusted professionals that you have, been working with for many years. They're going to help you through this on the other side as far as paperwork goes, as far as what you need to do. Your attorney is going to walk you through the legality of this and how to, what's the legality of transferring assets? Who's the executor? Are you the executor? Do you have to handle all that plus? So you're going to rely on a team of professionals and family members to help you through this. The other thing is, if you're on Social Security, if your spouse is on Social Security, your Social Security is going to change. And I love talking about Social Security. This can actually be, I will actually do a separate podcast just on Social Security changes for when you become a widow, because there's some important things that you do need to know. But just know that you are going to have to deal with Social Security. Your Social Security may change as a result of the death of your spouse. You also want to reach out to your spouse's employer, the HR department specifically, because you want to know how quickly you need to change over your insurance to COBRA if you're using your spouse's insurance. You also are going to have to ask them about the process of moving your spouse's 401k to your IRA if you're the beneficiary, like a rollover process or a transfer process. So that's also very important. Be also looking into to reaching out to the insurance companies. The most important, of course, is the life insurance companies. Sometimes you can use some of your life insurance policy to pay for the funeral costs. Funerals are not cheap. Even inexpensive funerals are expensive. So sometimes when you have insurance policies, they can help offset some of that cost for you. But then also there should hopefully be more money in that insurance policy that you can, distribute to the beneficiaries as well. There's a lot of other paperwork that you're going to want to look at. Sometimes you'll need the birth certificate of the person who died. Obviously, you also may need your marriage certificate for different reasons, the deed to your home or any other real property. You want to make a list of all the credit cards or any other debt or investments that you have, and you want to see whose name is first. You may have to change some account names. You may have to close some accounts. Joint accounts may need to be moved to single accounts. The one thing I will say, before you reach out to the bank, before you do any of the account changing, if you have written checks and, there's a chance that you're still having mortgage or whatever, you want to make sure that those checks are cashed before you start changing things, because sometimes when you go to a bank and the deceased name is first on the account, they may have to close that account. And if there's a change, they're going to close the account and those checks are going to bounce. So that is something really to be careful. Make sure you have the new account set up in your own name before you close an older account, so that you can make sure your bills are still getting paid and those checks aren't bouncing. It's incredible what has to happen, but you have to maybe sometimes take a couple extra steps. Also, you want to look at the titles to your home, any like cars, if you have a boat, anything other than that. You also want to look at any employer, benefits, like if your spouse had stock options or restricted stock units or any kind of extra benefits that they had. If they had a living trust, obviously their will, you want to, take a look at that. Like I said, you want to reach out to your attorney and have your attorney help you through all that. But you're also going to want to look at your investment accounts and things like that. Gathering all this information essentially. And if your spouse was military, you want to obviously get their discharge papers and any trust documents that you have as well. So those are just some of the things that you're going to have to gather and handle within the transfer process of, what was yours together and what will be yours going forward, and how you're handling some of the beneficiary type of situation. The other thing, while you're talking to the attorney about that, and this feels like, oh my gosh, this is not something I want to deal with, nor do I have the energy. The lack of energy is real. However, you need a new will, because most likely your spouse was your beneficiary on your will. If you're like me, my spouse is my beneficiary, my kids, are the contingent beneficiaries, things like that. Or if you have it set up in a trust, same thing. And the other thing is your spouse may be your executor. So, while you may have a backup executor or backup power of attorney, things like that, you need to redo these documents so that they are fresh. And again, it's not something that's perfect timing, but while you're speaking to the attorney, we may want to revisit this. And in a year or so, if you're feeling stronger and feel differently about who those people will be, you can change it again. But you definitely want to make sure that you're, coordinating paperwork and documents, especially legal documents, while you're there. Fix what you need to fix. There's a list of things that you may need to get done, I should say, in the first 90 days. And you want to reach out to your attorney, you want to reach out to your financial advisor and ask them, hey, what are some of the things I need to get done in like the first 90 days? If it's anything that could be put off, it's not as important. It's not, not something that you're really up for making a decision on, and it's safe to put it off, then that's okay too, because we want to make sure, as you're making more and more decisions, the fog has lifted a little bit. However, like if it's anything that's going to be required to protect you, your family, your kids, grandkids, that's something that can't wait. And you're going to, get somebody to guide you through that, but definitely you want to do that sooner rather than later. Some of the things that you want to ask your financial advisor about are saying, hey, now this is a life change, right? It's a major life change. How does that impact me? Am I still able to retire? Do I have enough money to retire? Do I have enough income throughout the rest of my lifetime? Can you redo my financial plan? This is a big change, right? Can I afford to keep my house? What do I do with the insurance proceeds? Are they taxed? How do I handle that? Does my insurance cover my kids if my kids are still, of that age? Or, if that's healthcare, but if it's life insurance and your insurance policy just had your spouse, you also need to change your beneficiaries on all of your accounts accounts as well. If you have young kids, do you have enough money for your kids' college education? If you're, at the age of Medicare, is there anything you need to do now for your Medicare coverage? Well, usually that answer would be no, because you don't have a joint Medicare policy. You have your own policy. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't revisit it. Call your Medicare representative and just tell them what happened and have them just, double check your stuff and make sure you're okay. Also, if your spouse has been receiving required minimum distributions and had retirement assets, how does that happen? That's something that I know as myself as a financial advisor, we talk a lot about that with our widows and widowers, and we help transition that for themselves. Social Security, like I said already, there's a big, there could be some changes there when your spouse passes. So that is, like I said, probably going to be another video that I do separately, because there's a lot to unravel there. How about your accountant? You probably want to also reach out to your accountant. You may have had quarterly tax payments. You may not have been paying them. Your spouse may have been paying them. He may have, or she may have taken care of that. So you want to reach out to the accountant, just say, hey, this is what happened. When are my next tax payments due? How much are they? Can you just resend me the coupons that I have to include on with that check and what the dates are and what's the amount, so I can get that done? Also, what are the estimates for me? If as you go forward, I'm going to have an estate, right? So there could be estate taxes. Can you work with me to figure out what that estate tax is going to look like over the next 12 months? And then how does my spouse's death affect me and my future tax payments? The sad truth is, a lot of times when a spouse dies, the next year or that tax year, you could be, well, usually the following tax year, but you could be in a bigger tax bracket and making less money. I've seen it a couple times where you had two spouses, they had two Social Securities, and they had, some other payments and whatnot for their cash flow. And then the one spouse passes, and now the other spouse only has one Social Security payment now and has lost some of that income, yet they wound up in a higher tax bracket because they went from joint filing married to filing single. So that could be an issue and bump you into another tax bracket. Also, guess what? Domino effect, big surprise, that could also increase your Medicare expenses or your Medicare premiums. So it does impact a little bit of everything, right? Can you talk with your financial advisor to cover some of these bases? Yes, but you also obviously want to include your accountant when you're talking about, crunching numbers for taxes, because they're the ones going to, do that actual accounting work for you. Here's the other thing. You really want to lean on your support system right now. Your family, your friends are extremely important. However, new friends, not such a good idea, because there's a lot of bad people out there who prey on widows and widowers, and they all of a sudden strike up this new friendship with you. Meanwhile, they're preying on you and trying to get money from you. So be very, very leery. I hate to say that. I know it sounds jaded, but it's reality. It happens. I've seen it happen. I know people that it actually happened to, and the family gets very worried about it. And sometimes things happen before the family can act. So use your support system, the one that you already have, your family, your friends, people you've known for a long time that you trust. And, hopefully they'll help you through this. And if you're listening to this and you know somebody who's a recent widow or has been a widow for a little while, the other thing to keep in mind is, at first, everyone surrounds the widow with a lot of love and support. And then a couple months goes by and we all go back to our regular busy lives and forget that they're standing there alone. And while at first they have that support dwindles because everyone goes back to their real lives. So maybe mark on your calendar 3 months from now, 6 months from now, take John or Betty out to lunch, or go have coffee with them, or go for a walk, do something with them, get them out of their house or apartment or something, so that they know people still care. So they really need their support system. So just remember, support system, let's do it, but keep it close to home, right? So the other thing is, there are support groups for widows, and they're in your area. They could be through your church, they could be through the community. I think that's a great idea to have community, a support system for people who really do understand what you're going through, because we all can sympathize, but unless we've been through it, it's a lot harder to understand what you're really living through. And lastly, what I would say on that note, as as far as moving forward, you want to stay active. You want to be involved with social activities in your community or even a walking group or something, because the worst thing that could happen right now is for you to isolate yourself and then add it to that fog and add it to that potential depression. That's just going to spiral you to a place where you don't really want to be. So getting outside, especially this time of year, the spring has sprung and it's beautiful outside. It just helps us to get a different mindset, frame of mind, and maybe helps clear some of the cobwebs in our head a little bit. Every little bit helps. Nothing is perfect, and there's plenty more that we can talk about here. But, like I said, there's a fog. So you do as much as you can. And sometimes that's one thing every day. You pick, you make a list of things that needs to get done. And you say, okay, well, I'm going to do one thing today that I have to do. And that's all I'm going to do. And then maybe tomorrow I do two. And then the following day, maybe I'm only going to do one. Just feels, how do I feel? And, determining it by your strength and how bad your fog is that day. So that's where I'll leave it. And I would say our action item is, if you're going through this, if you know somebody going through this, maybe suggest a widows group or just make sure that you're a good friend to them and check in on them now, but also many, many months from now when everybody has gone back to their regular scheduled lives. And with that, I think I will thank you so much for joining me. Again, I'm Regina McCann, HESS, president of Forge Wealth Management. My website is forgewealth.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Forge Wealth. LinkedIn is Regina McCann HESS. Go make it a great day. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Women in Wealth podcast. You can watch the founder's video I created for you to learn more about me and how I can guide you towards your financial independence at www.forgewealth.com. The information in this podcast is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration the listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, and SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Forge Wealth Management are separate entities from the LPL Financial. Our show guests and their companies are not affiliated with nor endorsed by LPL Financial, Private Advisor Group, or Forge Wealth Management.